Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Tom Chaney, and this is Living Health Live. Joining me on the show as a guest host is Andrea Dirks. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Andrea is a nurse practitioner and is part of the Living Health team. We are your trusted source for the latest information to help you get and stay healthy naturally. We're super excited to be joining you regularly to take you on an adventure of a lifetime, your lifetime of great health. You're going to get some great information, strategies, the latest research on how to live a better, healthier life. The information on the show is intended as educational information only. The information given here is designed to help you make an informed decision about your health and is not intended as a substitute for medical treatment. On today's episode, we're going to talk about hormones, happy, healthy hormones. We're going to demystify bioidentical hormone therapy, and we have a special guest with us. We're very honored to have Dr. David Rosensweet. He is a graduate of the University of Michigan Medical School. He graduated in 1968. Since 1971, he's been in private practice in Florida, New Mexico, California, and Colorado. Early in his career, the first nurse practitioners in the United States and was in charge of the health promotion for the state of New Mexico. He is a nationally known lecturer and presenter at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, the American College for Advancement in Medicine, the Age Management Medicine Group, and many more. In 2019, he was called to Washington to speak in front of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine on the safety and efficacy of bioidentical hormones. Dr. Rosen is the founder of the Menopause Method and the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine, where he's been training medical professionals how to master bioidentical hormone therapy using the most advanced and modern tools. His protocol has been used to treat more than 12,000 women. He was recently named one of the biggest names in anti-aging medicine by the American Academy of Anti-Aging. He's also the author of the books Menopause and Natural Hormones and Happy, Healthy Hormones, How to Thrive in Menopause. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you here. And just to kind of tie everything together, we met you and your son, my wife and I, we met you guys out at the American Academy of Anti-Aging out in Las Vegas at their big conference. And, one of the things we were looking for a solution for our patients for hormones. And we were looking at all these different products and companies. And one of the policies that we have is we wouldn't bring something into our office that we wouldn't use personally. And so that is a high bar and a high standard. And BRITE fit that standard and really checked all the boxes off. So great product. I'm really excited to have you here. Why don't we just start off with just talking about why is it important to have balanced hormones throughout life?
Well, the hormones are some of the most powerful biochemicals in our body. And men and women, we all peak at about the age of 20, and all of us decline. And when we lose that firepower, we can lose a lot of the things that we cherish. Energy, mood, these are very psychoactive hormones. Libido, muscles, actual muscles, strength, cognitive function, because they're so potent. And back in the day, we didn't have to worry about that. Nobody lived past midlife, so there was no thing as menopause and andropause.
Yeah, great. What are some of the common signs and symptoms that say someone might experience if their hormones are out of balance? What are some of the common signs and symptoms that someone whose hormones are out of balance, symptoms that they might experience?
Well, let's take women, for example. Even in the decline, there's so much resilience to youth that even though the declines are taking place, they're not necessarily felt by all women. But some women, even in their 30s, they're starting to get increased PMS, irregular periods, mood issues, loss of libido, vaginal dryness, waking up in the middle of the night, sleep disturbance. For in the audience, anyone who's ever experienced losing them one night or 2 nights of sleep, we know the effect of that, How about 10 nights of sleep?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the surface stuff. What's actually going on is muscles, for example. Muscles require several things to stay strong and walking. And one of them is testosterone, men and women. And so many women wind up in assisted living facilities because they transition from canes to walkers because of loss of muscle to wheelchairs. That's a major change. And then the loss of the muscle that holds up the pelvic organs leads to bladder issues and adult diapers. And so the big stuff is the long-term stuff, the stuff that runs silent and run deeps, bone loss, loss of arterial protection. But let's go back to the immediates. A young woman in her 30s could start experiencing pain on intercourse, or waking up in the middle of the night with a racing mind and a night sweat, or maybe in her 40s. And that's the real strong stuff that catches people's attention. And then for men, they may lose their morning erection somewhere along the way. Okay, they don't think about that too much. But when they lose erectile function, this is very, very impactful for a man. And this can happen, I've seen it in his 30s, in a man in their 40s. It didn't used to be like this, but it is now. So the symptoms of declining hormones, these most powerful biochemicals in our body, are many. And I also want to mention the mind. A lot of women who are very clear thinking and very motivated, they lose their estrogen, they lose their androgens, and they start not remembering things and getting brain fog. So it's everywhere. So the miracle is, in this day and age, we can replenish those.
Right. Yeah, I know these the key hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone definitely play a very key vital role in our daily health and vitality. Now I want to get to the core definition of bioidentical hormones. So what exactly are bioidentical hormones?
Well, let me work backwards. The very first hormones that we have record of, they were bioidentical. It's 1,000 years ago, the Chinese aristocracy figured out that if they would collect the urine of young women and another batch of urine from young men and they dried it out and they took the dried product there, they would get restoration of libido, function, because the hormones are in the urine, and that means they're bioidentical. We know that they're bioidentical because the most sophisticated laboratories that assess hormones actually analyze the pure hormone, the pure estradiol, the pure estriol, the pure testosterone. So it's in the urine of humans. Well, in the 1940s, the pharmaceutical industry, recognizing the issue around menopause, wanted to find a large source of these hormones. They tried pregnant women's urine for a while, but it wasn't practical. So they started catheterizing horses, mares, female horses, pregnant female horses, and they collected the urine and dried it out. That simple. And they gave it the name Premarin, from pregnant mare urine. This is bioidentical for horses, but 50% of those estrogens, for example, that were in Premarin had never been seen by the human female body. But this was the most popular and profitable pharmaceutical medication of all time by 2002. 18 million American women were on Premarin or Prempro. That was 40% of all American women in menopause. And then I'll skip on to what's bioidentical. In the 1980s, a dear pioneer in the world of functional medicine, Jonathan Wright, came up with the idea, gee, do we really need to get this from horses? Isn't this available from plants? And so sure enough, his compounding pharmacist did a search and found pure, molecularly identical, same molecule as a woman's ovary puts out, same molecule that a man's testicle puts out, identical. So it's molecularly identical, and they're derived from plants. a lot of plants have the precursor to these hormones, and the precursor is extracted and it's put through a pretty sophisticated biochemical process to turn up the molecule. Like, for example, our human bodies take the molecule cholesterol and we convert it to testosterone, estradiol, all of them. Well, they take this plant extract called diadesin and they put it through a couple of conversions and it turns into testosterone, estradiol, estriol, pure, same molecule. And these are purchased by special pharmacists called compounding pharmacists. All pharmacists were compounders up until about 70 years ago. They bought the raw materials and they stuck them in their mortar and pestle and ground them up, and whether they were herbs or whatever they were, they made individual doses. Well, that pharmaceutical world has changed, but a lot of the pharmacists kept with their heritage. And these compounding pharmacists, there's 7,500 of them in the United States. They purchase the pure, molecularly identical hormone powder, and they put them up in creams and gels and capsules. Same molecule that came out of the ovary, same molecule that came out of the testicles.
Great. So what type of plant sources are these bioidentical hormones typically coming from? How is the lab processing them to get those molecules?
The pharmaceutical industry owns soy fields. Soy has a significant amount of diadesin in it. And yams are a very rich source of this as well, but it's harder to get 82 billion tons of yams than it is 82 billion tons of soy. I'm exaggerating there a little bit. And so they're processing soy. And, I wish I knew the details. I wish I could say it was organic soy, because soy is heavily manipulated. I wish I could say it was non-GMO soy. But the purification processes and biochemistry is very, very sophisticated. They do have the capability of weeding out the non-beneficial stuff and getting it down to the same molecule. And you hope and pray that there's nothing else in there.
I know we discussed, and you mentioned the differences in obtaining your traditional kind of synthetic hormones, animal-derived hormones like the Premarin and the Prempro, compared to the plant-based sources that are used for bioidentical hormone therapy. Is there differences in the potential physiologic interactions because of that molecularly identical structure of the bioidentical hormones?
Great question. I think, like in so many areas of life, we start out with project A and product A, and then over the course of years, things improve and improve and improve and improve and improve. And the distribution of Premarin made a major difference to millions and millions of women with great benefit. And yet things have gotten better. And when you ask, if I were to ask you or Thomas or almost anyone well, what would you like? Would you like the horse, or would you like something that's probably, it's like I own one of the first Macintoshes, the one in a box. I don't know if you saw those things. And, I loved it. It was fabulous. It did wonderful work for us. But now I'd prefer my little Mac Mini here. It's improved. But to get to the essence of your question, there are differences. Let me give you a little history here. In 2002, there was a study that came out that falsely declared, it wasn't in the study, but the press reported, was there increased risk for breast cancer. And it scared physicians and women all over the world. And that 18 million dropped to below 2 million, with dire consequences for those women. And at that point, a lot of women couldn't stand it, and they decided to have the hormones anyway. And then also there was a rising field called functional medicine folks who were prescribing compounded bioidentical hormones since the 80s. And that started to rise. And by a study in 2016, there was about 6 million American women on hormones, and over half of them were on compounded bioidentical hormones. Well, this was noted, and I hope I'm not going too deep into the weeds here. This was noted by the pharmaceutical industry, who started producing their own bioidentical hormones. And they're 20, 30 years behind. So what they're offering is an upgrade from the original Premarin, to be sure. For example, estrogens. You can get estrogen in a patch. You can get estradiol in a patch, almost bioidentical. You can get estradiol in a gel, commercially produced by pharmaceutical manufacturers. And you can also get, quote, bioidentical progesterone in a capsule called Prometrium, along with some yellow dye and a few other dyes in there, and some peanut oil or in peanut oil. It just amazes me how they get away with this with so many people with peanut allergies. And these are improvements. But the bioidentical world, which really got launched in the 80s, has just kept trucking along from a lot of interested professionals who really wanted to get this one right. And the improvements are enormous. And there's, like, for example, Dr. Wright coined the phrase copy nature and the importance of this. When you don't know what to do, copy nature. So one of the things he learned was that a young healthy woman puts out not estradiol alone, she puts out 3 significant estrogens. In fact, the word estrogen is a family name that includes estradiol, estrone, and estriol. And he based his work on a study done by a medical doctor oncologist who was specializing in breast cancer, and a university researcher, Dr. Lemon, who took the urine of young healthy women, because checking out the urine is the state of the art when you're dealing with hormones, 24-hour urines. This is in the late 1960s. And Dr. Lemon discovered there was more estriol in a young woman's urine than there was the sum of the 2 most potent estrogens, estradiol and estrone. And when he studied the urine of women who had breast cancer, there was less estriol by quite a bit. And he proposed that estriol was important, and Dr. Wright said, look, when in doubt, why don't we just copy nature, because that's what the young woman does. And then in the 1990s, estrogen receptor sites were discovered. And I know I'm going deep into the weeds, so you interrupt me if you want to take me in a different direction here.
No, it's great.
And receptor sites were discovered. And every young woman's cycle, known to so many, it goes through a couple phases. The whole first phase of a menstrual cycle is leading towards possible fertilization and accepting a fertilized egg. And it's called a proliferative phase. And what proliferates is the lining to the womb. New cells, there to form a rich bed to receive a fertilized egg. Well, lo and behold, and this is sort of staggering to me when I first learned it, the breasts are also preparing for breastfeeding. Every single cycle, there is new cells, new breast glandular cells being formed. Cell division. Women experience this often as increased breast fullness as their cycle progresses. Preparing for breastfeeding right there each menstrual cycle? Wild. And so that's part of proliferation too. If there's no fertilization, there's a whole deproliferation phase. And in the deproliferation, eventually it leads to the shedding of the uterine lining. Deproliferation, all right. Menstruation. And in the breast, it results in disappearance by a well-named process called apoptosis of the new breast glandular cells, and a woman's breast return to less full. And then it begins all over again. Well, finally, I'm getting to the punchline here. Proliferation is guided, so to speak, or inspired by the interaction of an estrogen with estrogen receptor site alpha. It's proliferative. Deproliferation is inspired, so to speak, by the interaction of estrogen with estrogen receptor site beta. The main proliferating estrogen, estradiol. Bless its heart. It's an amazing hormone. It does so much good. The main deproliferating estrogen, estriol. So Dr. Lemon uncovered something, but he didn't know the reason. He didn't know anything about deproliferation and proliferation. So it all comes back to, look, bottom line, copy nature, you're probably heading in the right direction. And Dr. Wright proposed not treatment with just estradiol as present in the patch and the gels. No, he said we should copy nature and let's treat with two estrogens, the estradiol and the estriol, biased. And so for decades, certainly me, I started in 1992, I've only treated women with biased for that very reason. And then lo and behold, out comes the research in the last years that there's this estrogen receptor site beta. We should develop a drug to support deproliferation. Maybe it'll be cancer protective. And Dr. Wright responded with, why don't you just give estriol? That's how nature does it. So we think that the proper administration of estrogen is biased. 80% estriol. We really lean into that deproliferative thing because we love to see proliferation in a young woman. It's part of health, part of fertility. But we don't want to see breast glandular cell proliferation in a menopausal woman. So we really lean into the estriol with great results. So there is no commercial product called bias. No pharmaceutical manufacturers are decades behind. And it really gets complicated for them because here's a whole other subject. Lo and behold, we may look very similar, like Thomas and I look similar in a special way, and we both look similar to you in a lot of ways. We're humans. But the individual variation, one man to the next, in need, sensitivity, absorptive ability, the difference one woman to the next, need, sensitivity, balance, it's really wide. And best medicine doesn't call for, here's 2 aspirin, call me in the morning. It calls for individualization. Like, for example, we know our numbers. We know what it takes to alleviate symptoms and help a woman oscillate into optimal doses of estrogen, let's say, of bias. Want to alleviate her hot flashes, not get too high, not get too low. We know that in our patient population, it takes from 0.88 milligrams of estradiol equivalents to, these numbers aren't going to mean anything, but I want to show you the range, 0.88 to 4.8. Holy mackerel. Every woman, or most every woman, falls into that range. And you want to get it right because, and then when you throw in the same variation with progesterone needs and sensitivity and the same variation with testosterone sensitivity and variation of absorption, you got a lot of variables there. In clinical practice, because we have the ability to be precise in our prescriptions to compounding pharmacists, they don't care how many milligrams they stick in there. They can do an infinite number of variations of dosages. And that suits us just fine because we are able to dial it in and personalize it to the individual. And that's the main advantage to compounded bioidentical hormones is we can personalize it. Never mind the purity of the molecule, which means a lot to me. I mean, all three of us, we know how important it is to get pure stuff and not get other stuff. Mm-hmm. And so there's, and the pharmaceutical industry, this does not lend itself to manufacturing. You cannot manufacture 82 different variations of every, of 4 hormones. It's not practical. So there's always going to be a need for compounding. May it survive the pressure from the pharmaceutical industry that would like to get rid of it because they lost so much market share. And that's another subject.
So yeah, I just want to recap kind of what you said, that 3 of the main advantages of choosing bioidentical hormones are: 1, like you said, the purity; 2, the ability to copy nature; and then 3, that each treatment can be personalized to each different patient, which is really huge when it comes to hormones. Now, based on your experience and your research, Dr. Rosensweet, what are some of the primary benefits that patients might experience when they're appropriately using these bioidentical hormones?
They're legendary and they're profound. And, you know, your vitamin C drops a little low, your vitamin E drops a little low, your selenium drops a little low. There's thousands of biochemicals that matter. You may or may not feel that. But you get a neurotransmitter to drop low, or you get a hormone to drop low, they're life disruptive. So 80% of women, for example, as they start getting these declining hormone levels, they don't get mild symptoms. They get symptoms. They get life disruptive symptoms. Can't think clearly, can't sleep, mood all over the place, pain on intercourse, loss of strength. These are life stopping. And you could say, well, that's not good. And I could counter with, you know, that's the purpose of symptoms. It's to stop our life and catch our attention and ask the question, what's going on here? And symptoms are capable, economic collapse is capable of doing that, marital collapse and symptoms. They're all capable of getting someone to start asking the question, what's going on here? The issue around menopause and andropause is you got to come up with the right answer. You can't say, I need to go to the gym more, or I need to improve my diet. Yes, these matter for sure, absolutely. But you got to get the hormones right. And it sends many women and many men, when a man loses erectile function, for example, on a path to get this one right and start sleeping again and feel strong again and feel motivated again and not have uterine cramps and not have weird bleeding and not have pain on intercourse and on and on and on. The symptom list is very long and very useful. Let me put it that way, because it'll get people to do what they need to do. The women I'm more concerned about is the women who don't have symptoms. They're looking around going, what's this big deal about menopause? My menopause was so easy. Yeah, they're getting the same muscle loss. They're getting the same arterial atherosclerosis change. They're getting the same cognitive changes leading to possible dementia. Same bladder issues, same vaginal issues. But these aren't screamers. These are long, slow things. Same bone loss. Oh, my God, bone loss. So the symptoms, and then when you alleviate those symptoms, well, this is why I'm here today, is it was so dramatic for me. I've been on the front lines of functional medicine, seeing patients with diabetes, obesity, hypertension, cancer, all kinds of things. And to help people reverse those, it's doable, and it's a miracle to heal those. And it can be a slow-moving train and not so easy, as you know so well. And then along comes me giving my first patient progesterone in 1993, and she was feeling awful. She stormed into my office early one morning, prior to office hours, slams her fist on the desk. She's in her mid-40s. I knew her very well. She was so brilliant. She had retired in her mid-40s. Think about what it takes to do that. That's how brilliant she was. And she slammed her fist on my desk and said, I'm going crazy. I'm not kidding you, and I don't want you to pretend like you know me. I'm telling you, I'm going crazy. And serendipitously, I had just spoken to a world expert on progesterone, gave her some progesterone. 3 weeks later, I get a letter from her. That's how things were done in those days. Saying, I can't believe this stuff. I'm totally myself again. Thank you so much. I hadn't been used to that dramatic benefit, because you got midlife women and men a lot of whom are doing pretty well and taking care of their health, but when the hormones crash, it's big. But it doesn't take that much. It just takes replenishing the hormone. It doesn't take months and years to reverse dietary trends, stress issues. So anyway, that was very dramatic, and I just thought, this is wonderful. Get results. I think that's why I did go into become a doctor. I think I wanted results. The patients sure want the results. You know that.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I know you just listed, and I'm sure I know there's a million more than you even listed, the benefits of hormone replacement therapy. Who is typically a good candidate for considering bioidentical hormone replacement?
You know what? There was something I left out about the previous question that I promised to go to who. What I came to learn over time is the alleviation of life disruptive symptoms was beautiful. And people loved it and were so grateful for it. But as I started treating older and older people and started seeing what happened to older people, which I was told in medical school, I was told by a lecture from a gerontologist to our senior medical class, you students, you know thousands of diagnoses. Let me tell you what's really happening to older people. They're losing their muscles, they can't walk with stability, they fall on their osteoporotic bones, they fracture their hip, and they die. Or they're losing their mind and heading towards dementia. You want to do something for older people? Help them with their muscle, bones, and brain. And what I started seeing is, and having personal experience with relatives who went into assisted living facilities and nursing homes, that this was a tragic moment for them. They could no longer live in their own home. They were incapable of walking and taking care of themselves in bladder control. And I started to get it that the long-term benefits of reversing cognitive issues and not heading someone towards dementia. There's many causes of dementia, but for women, the major cause is low estrogens. And not getting muscle loss, sarcopenia, and having to go into wheelchairs, and not having to do adult diapers. This is what 80% of women who are in assisted living facilities and nursing homes are there because of low hormones. I started to see the long-term benefits. And in our school, we really emphasize the beauty of the long-term, because none of us, and those of us who love our elder relatives, mine are passed, actually, we know how monumental it is to stay at home. And it's what's going to keep most of them at home, 80% of them at home, replenishing of hormones. Now, who? I'd say every human being that is capable of breathing air. Everyone, because everyone loses their hormones.
Yeah.
And so that's my simple response. Everybody.
So how would you know? Well, I think maybe I'm jumping ahead. Somebody that maybe like a younger male or female that doesn't have symptoms, how would you know it's right for them, and how would you get their how would they know? Maybe talk about testing and what you recommend there.
Well, so many of them do know. Like one of the most common things that happens to younger women, and I was describing a general hormone decline, but let's talk about two of the four ovarian hormones, progesterone and estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
They don't decline at the same rate. The progesterone tends to dip earlier and deeper than the estrogen does. And they start getting symptoms. They start getting the stimulatory effects of estrogen. Estrogen stimulates.
Yeah.
So they start getting uterine cramps again. They start getting heavy bleeding again. They're not sleeping as well. They get mood stuff like Deborah, the patient I told you about. She thought she was going crazy. Well, there's variations of that called anxiety. That's the most common things that happens to young women is, yes, we all have stressful lives, but these young women start reporting anxiety. Doesn't make sense. Their life is good enough. They're strong enough. And when you hear that from a young woman, numero uno, go after their menstrual cycle and see if you can pick up on that there's an imbalance there and give them progesterone. It's miraculous. So often the young people do have symptoms, and that'd be the very first thing that leads them there is going to be the symptoms. And same with young men. It's shocking. Things have changed for men over the course of my lifetime. We're seeing young men in their 30s. I had a patient the other day in his 30s getting erectile dysfunction. And we know the sperm counts are half or a fifth of what they were when I was in medical school. We know what's going on there. And I don't have to dive into that. We know what some of these causes are. But actually, it's the symptoms that bring people to our offices.
Right.
Now, to kind of give some of our listeners a little bit more context, we all know that no treatment is without potential risks. So what are some of the known or potential risks associated with bioidentical hormone therapy?
Let's put it another way. Proper treatment with hormones and proper hormones, there should be zero risk. And if you're experiencing something that's funky, it's pilot error. You just haven't been dialed in all the way. Now, of course, I know why you asked that question, because nowhere in medicine have you heard anything so outrageous that if you take hormones, you're putting yourself at risk for breast cancer or prostate cancer. I'd like to dispel this. This is the opposite of what science has proven. The opposite. And why it came into being, and you know this, that in 2002 there was this study underway with 16,000 women. That's a big study. That's a good thing. And they were trying to assess, really the motivation of the study was they knew hormones were good for women, but they wanted to prove that it was also good for their hearts. So there was an intention behind that study. And they wanted to prove that their market share could expand, because you not only want to treat women for menopause, you want to give them the protection that estrogen has for the hearts. Well, in 2002, one of the study committee members read the data and stopped the study against the objection of other members on the study committee, an uproar. He called a meeting of the study committee and said, "I'm stopping the study." And they said, "You can't stop this study. Why?" He said, "Because there's increased risk." And they said, "No, there isn't." And he says, "Well, I think there is." And they said, "No, you can't stop the study." He says, "Too late. We already leaked it to the press, and there's going to be a press release here. And it's already printed in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The article's already been printed." Scandal, craziness, the human race. I don't know if either of you have noticed that human beings can be a little wobbly. And man, wobbly. And overnight, the press grabbed hold of this, said there was increased risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. And it spread like wildfire. Never seen an event like this in my whole medical career. But here's what was actually being shown in the study. That women treated with Premarin alone, horse urine-derived estrogen, were at 21% reduced risk for getting breast cancer. That was in the study. And in the study, when they stopped it, there was a 1.26 relative risk for women who were on Prempro. Prempro is a combination of Premarin with this funky molecule known to be problematic called a progestin, not progesterone, medroxyprogesterone acetate. And there was a 1.26 relative risk, and coupled with that statement in the study, but this was statistically insignificant. And what anyone in science and medicine knows is if you see the word statistical insignificant, it says don't draw any conclusions here, folks. We don't have any evidence. But that's not what the press did. And once that cat was out of the bag, they couldn't put it in. Well, they continued the study, and by 2006, the relative risk for Prempro went down to 1, meaning there was no increased risk or decreased risk. And in 2017, the same study committee published in the same journal a retraction in which they stated that after 18 years of follow-up, there is no increased risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. zillions of people on the planet, I don't know if there's a full zillion out there, but a lot, let's say a lot, knew about the risk. Very few providers and very few women learned that the study was recanted. Now, there are pioneers out there marching around the country, doctors who've written books, and slowly but surely it's leaking back into mainstream that, oops, made a mistake here. Very costly for a lot of human beings. And then the functional when I first saw that study, I looked at the study and I went, "This is crazy. This is false information they're putting out there." I just marched along, as did several of my colleagues. And so I've now forgotten your original question.
No, I mean, I think you definitely kind of answered it. And
what are the risks? What are the risks?
Right.
Now there's errors that can be made. One of the most common errors that are made is insufficient dosages. And because a woman's raucous symptoms of hot flashes and night sweats can be alleviated by a low dose, but that low dose is not sufficient to protect her vagina and bones, let alone her brain, her coronary arteries, her bladder. So we know this. We did a study ourselves in which we always test women 3 months into their program, 4 months, 5 months into their program. We do not test them before that. We test them when they come to us and say, "Wow, we've been working with the dosages and I've landed. I feel good." That's when we test 100% of our women with 24-hour urine hormone testing. And the study we did was great, but 50% of them were on insufficient estrogen so that their bones and vagina were at risk. Just took a little tweaking, but they came in less than what the numbers we know that they need. And 25% of them came on dosages excessive that put them at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation. We don't want that in menopausal women. In most instances, there are exceptions. So we not only rely on symptom alleviation, we confirm it with 24-hour urine hormone testing. We know what the parameters are for right dose and what's too little and what's too much. So it isn't side effects, it's adverse effects from insufficient dosing, and it's side effects from excessive dosing or imbalance. That's, to me, there's another silent one, and maybe this is the time to bring it up. The gold standard for hormone administration of estrogen and testosterone, for sure, is transdermal. There's perils, there's risks involved with oral estrogens, bioidentical or not. We learn that from the birth control pill. There's a certain small percentage of women who wound up getting thrombophlebitis, a clot in their leg vein. Some of them even had a pulmonary embolus. That clot broke loose and went to their lungs. It was uncommon, but it did occur, and we know why it occurred. It came from oral estrogen. So I could almost say never is there a place for oral estrogen of any kind because of that particular risk. And when you take oral doses, they go right to the liver, so you have to give higher doses, so the liver winds up producing procoagulation proteins and pro-inflammation proteins. So oral, forget about it. Estrogen, don't do it. And until recently, and it still isn't proven to me, there was no safe oral testosterone. Now this may be changing, but the possibility of liver damage means you don't give testosterone orally. In fact, it works. These hormones work beautifully transdermally. And the traditional way of doing this was putting these hormones into creams or gels. That's what the compounding pharmacies did. In fact, when pharmaceutical manufacturers first started to do their, quote, bioidentical version, they put it up in the same gel as the compounders use, carbopol. And then by serendipity, I hope this isn't going too deep into the weeds for you all.
No.
I keep checking in with you. By serendipity, I was 10 years into treating women with hormones, and I had never seen a hormone. I wrote a prescription to my local compounding pharmacy. He shipped it directly to the patient. He was 60 miles away in Albuquerque. I was in Santa Fe. And then one day, by error, they shipped one of my patients' bias to my office in a white cosmetic jar, and you dosed out by these little spoons. That's back in the primal days. And I was fascinated. There it was, my first chance to see a hormone, and it was sealed. And I cracked the seal in my patient's bias and opened up the jar lid, and out comes this strong odor. And I went, what is this? And I learned that these ovarian hormones and testicular hormones are fat soluble. In fact, they're insoluble in water. They're very poorly soluble unless they're in strong solvents. And over 99% was in that jar was the strong solvent called carbapol. And here I am, a functional medicine doc, and I'm going, oh, this is cool. I'm detoxifying patients right and left. And at the same time, I'm toxifying my andropause and menopause patients to the tune of a quart a year for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So my son and I went on to do quite a bit of research, and we came up with an organic oils delivery system. So it's another reason to go. Bioidentical is one thing when you're dealing with hormones, but the carrier for these topical hormones really matters as well. And the method we use, and there's 44 pharmacies around the United States doing it. We have a central pharmacy. It's in a certified organic oil. It's beautiful. So I wanted to mention that one because what is best case scenario that your audience is going to really want? They may not know it yet, but they're going to want the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know you've started to talk about it, that you've developed a specific protocol outlined in your book, Happy Healthy Hormones, called the BRITE method. Can you tell us what BRITE stands for and kind of your philosophy? Explain a little bit more about your philosophy behind it.
Well, we call it a method, but in another way, how I unfolded this method was by paying a lot of attention. And here I am, a male, and back in '92, there was so little known about these hormones and how to do it. I thought I better partner up with my patients and figure this out together. And I wrote a book saying, here, women, is what perimenopause looks like from a symptom perspective. Here's what these hormones are. And I knew that the hormones were going into the women's bodies. And I knew if I started low, because I already understood this I had a mentor in thyroid, and I don't know if these stories are fun or helpful or not, but they really represent where all this came from. I was mentoring a wonderful doctor named Alan Gaby in the early 90s. And we're going patient to patient, and we walk into this one patient's room, and we walk out, and he says, she's hypothyroid. And you haven't got a clue of what to write on your prescription pad. But it doesn't matter. We'll start her on a low dose. We'll gradually increase that dose, and she'll find her own dose by symptom alleviation. And I'm sitting there going, find your own dose. He went to medical school. I went to medical school. I never heard anything about find your own dose. Here, you got a strep throat. Here's some penicillin. Go find your own dose. I never heard anything like that. But sure enough, it's called dose titration to symptom alleviation. And if you go too high, you get symptoms of overdose. And so I did that, woman after woman after woman. And I also had the advantage of the 24-hour urine hormone test that we were doing. So this is 33 years of doing that. And so all I did was pay close attention. And we have a board, and we're laying down what we think is standard of care. And anyone on our board or any patient or any doctor that joins our system or nurse practitioner can challenge that. Because we're not trying to come up with a method. We're trying to see what is the way that human beings do best. And we've learned a lot of principles. We learned better individualize this. If you're getting the hormones, you're going to want to get it right for your body. It's not a problem. It's just a process. So we wind up like with an individual patient, and this is part of the BRITE method. Again, it's not a method, it's just common sense. So a woman comes in with hot flashes, and we know these are from low estrogen, almost always. And she can't fall asleep, and we know this is from low progesterone, and she's got anxiety that's new to her, and we know pretty much. And she's getting flab under her triceps, and she can't get out of a chair as quickly as she used to, and she's lost some of her drive. We know this is low testosterone, her libido has dropped, and she's got vaginal dryness, and this is low estrogen. And we start low, and we start off gradually increasing both the bias and the progesterone at the same time until a woman says, woohoo, we got this. And we put most of these women on testosterone in the beginning, and most of them, and then we start titrating that one up until we get the symptoms of testosterone deficiency alleviated. And that's the method of dose determination. And if they go too high, they're going to get symptoms of overdose, most of them. And as a backup, we do that 24-hour urine hormone test when a patient says, I've got this. And usually there's a tweak involved because they're not spot on, and that's the value of that test. But we don't have to retest them. It's usually just a tweak. So that's the core of the method, along with the organic oils.
Yeah.
The body of knowledge is big. And I think you, Thomas, have already gotten into this. And so have you, Andrea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know there's a lot of details involved. That's the good news.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There's a lot of intricacies, but they're not intricacies that we invented as the BRITE method. They're just paying a lot of attention and focusing that attention on the individual provider into the patient themselves. We also have my son and my beloved other partner. We believe to make this accessible to more and more women and men, we needed to bring the price down. And because we've trained so many people, we've been able to approach national pharmacies to lower the prices significantly of the hormones, lower the test costs, and provide software that goes A to Z. Like I learned that airplane pilots work off of these checklists. Aren't they going in there using their minds and their experience? No, they're not. They're working off these extensive checklists. And I learned that when I trained, and here's a interesting side note. I trained the very 6 first nurse practitioners on the planet Earth. I know their names. And they were amazing. And they were operating off of checklists. And I went, checklists? We didn't have checklists. And then after a while I went, checklists prevent errors. And that's why these pilots are doing it. And that's why operating rooms are doing it. These operating rooms are not functioning by, oh, let's just see how it goes today. They got to check everything off because you can miss things. Mm-hmm. So we know what that process is, A to Z. So we built it into computer technology, software, apps. So our patients have an app. The providers communicate with the patients through a portal. The providers have the portal. And it allows us to gather a lot of data for prospective studies, which is really important as well. But we're working on A to Z, everything. And Thomas, maybe you've already run into that in the Monday morning part that follows the training programs. This we do Monday morning. There's the checklist. Do the checklist. You're going to be practicing. So we've just paid a lot of attention to it. I think the main difference is when I was growing up in medicine, all these specializations were occurring. And I was saying to myself, they don't understand. They've got to treat the whole person. And then as a young functional medicine doc, I'm going, I can't get my arms around all the whole knowledge base anymore. I can't be excellent at cognition. If someone's heading towards dementia, yes, I know a lot and I have a lot of tools, but man, I've got to send them to a functional medicine doctor who's doing this 24/7 and has been trained by Dr. Bredesen. Same with cardiovascular. I said, I'm out of integrity everywhere. I'm a master of a lot of things. I know a lot of stuff. I've been doing it since 1970. But I chose my lane. I chose the hormone lane, and it's a very important thing that we take this one on as a full study and get good at it, because there's a lot of intricacies in dealing with these most powerful biochemicals. We want to get really good at it. So there is an A to Z, and we're promoters of, through the BRITE method, do the A to Z. People like it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that the BRITE method kind of, like you said, it's not necessarily anything new, but it brings it all together and kind of lines it all up for the providers and the patients. And I know you've spoken on it previously in this webinar, but I kind of want to ask you to re-emphasize some outcomes or some shifts in well-being that you typically observe in the patients that follow this BRITE method.
Sure. And it's also bringing up, I don't think I did justice to risk. Could I go to risk first?
Yeah.
I didn't take it so far as to tell people what the actual science is, because there's a tremendous amount of science. And it all comes down to this. All of us, we're human beings, we're at risk for a lot of stuff, thousands of diagnoses. And we're at risk for hundreds of cancers. And as a male, I'm at increased relative risk for prostate cancer. This is new in history, and there's reasons for this. And women are at increased relative risk for breast cancer. This is new. This wasn't true when I was in medical school, and there's reasons for this. Given that we're all at risk, here's the science. Women who are on hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are not on hormones. And even to take it one step further, women who have had breast cancer and had that breast cancer properly treated, they happen to be at increased risk for recurrence, relatively speaking, than a woman who has of getting breast cancer who's never had it. But given that they're at increased relative risk, if they've had proper treatment of that cancer, that risk is lessened if they're on hormones than if they're not. Same for men. The myth out there is if a man has prostate cancer and you give him testosterone, it's like putting fuel on gasoline on a fire. That the opposite is true. Men who are treated with hormones are at less risk for prostate cancer than men who've never been treated with hormones. And if they have prostate cancer and they're treated with hormones, they're at less risk for the vicious prostate cancers that are life-taking.
Great.
That's the science. And then the question you actually asked me, would you repeat it, Andrea?
Yeah. I know you've mentioned a few times the different benefits, those risks that you've just covered and benefits as well. But if you could just kind of re-emphasize outcomes and shifts in well-being that a lot of the patients that follow this BRITE method typically see once they reintroduce those hormones into their lives.
Yeah. There's the most common ones are the midlife disruptive ones, where a woman is getting brain fog. Professional women used to high-level functioning. They're not remembering things as clearly. And they're not sleeping well, and they're getting mood changes, and they've lost their libido, and they're having pain on intercourse. And for most women, these are easily remediable back to, I feel great again, I'm myself again. Then there's the long-term stuff. What they don't know, they're not losing the bone. They're not losing the muscle. They're not heading towards dementia because of cognitive decline. Yes, there's other causes of dementia, but the majority of women who start getting brain fog and head towards actual dementia, that can be prevented by hormones. And there's the silent stuff, the protection of the coronary arteries. Half the women who leave Earth leave it because of complications of arteriosclerosis. Not young women. You might occasionally hear of a young man, he was in his 40s. He had a heart attack on a tennis court. He never was sick a day in his life. But you never hear that about young women because estrogen is so protective to the coronary arteries. So these are the long-term stuff that I've come to appreciate as, man, this is the real service that we're doing here, is the long-term stuff. Keep them living at home, keep them walking, talking, and thinking. So those are some of the benefits.
Great. What sort of key questions should someone ask a potential provider to ensure that they're receiving knowledgeable and personalized care to them?
Ooh, the big one. This is what it comes down to. From the eyes of from the perspective of patients, they're going to start experiencing symptoms, and they go out into the world to find someone that can help them. And you go to you broke your arm, and you go to almost any orthopedic surgeon on the planet, and you don't have to sort them out. They've all been trained well, unless they're a bad egg, and there's not that many of them. You're going to get great service. You can't do that in the world of hormones. You can't just go to your gynecologist. They didn't get specific training in this. Nobody did. And so you're going shopping, and I love that you bring us to this point, Andrea, because I think this is the most important thing for women and men. You want to link up with a provider that really knows what they're doing. And there's a couple of key questions you can ask, and you're probably only going to be able to talk to the office manager. But prior to that, for a woman facing symptoms, check out your network of friends and family. Invariably, there's this woman who's been on hormones. They've already done the research for you. And you ask them who you're going to, and they say, yeah, I love this nurse practitioner. She really knows her stuff. She's specializing in this. So referral from a trusted friend is the number one thing. The number two is you're going to be talking to an office manager, and here's what you want to know. You want to know that they're doing bioidentical. You want to, when you go onto the provider's website, you want to see best case scenario that they're all about hormones and menopause and andropause. They specialize in it. What you're going to encounter is people who are listing 1,000 things that they're doing, and that's not ideal, because you want someone who's really focused and gets great at this. You want a neurosurgeon who's done 82,000 brain operations before they get, God forbid, my brain. I recently went to an ophthalmologist. I went shopping. I was looking for someone for cataracts, and man, I went to a couple of them before I finally went, okay, I've nailed it. You'll know, because you're going to use your intuition. You're going to feel good with the office. They're going to be doing bioidenticals for sure. Best case, they've done some very significant training. Best case, they're using organic oils. And best case is they're testing with 24-hour urine hormone testing. If they're not, and I'm not talking about the dried urine, I'm not talking about the 5-point. No, I want someone who's doing 24-hour urine. So I'm talking about the best of the best. Now, having said that, not everyone has easy access to the best of the best. If you do someone who knows about hormones, is hormone friendly, and gives you hormones, you're going to do good. The women who were on Premarin, they did much better than their counterparts. And if you add some testosterone and some good progesterone in there, so I don't want to make it sound like you have to go to the perfect. You don't have to go to the best of the best of the best. You can do good with a lot of folks, but a provider you trust, a provider that promises a process to you, that they're going to have, the first year is going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 consultations to help you dial it in. So those are some of the guidelines. You can also go to, there's 7,500 compounding pharmacists, as I mentioned. They're filling the prescriptions. And so many times they know who's the one, they know who the physicians and nurse practitioners who know what they're doing or not. And so what I recommend to women is go into the pharmacy. These are busy folks. They're not necessarily going to do it over the phone. But if they see an individual patient, they're very respectful. And they'll want to talk to you. And you say, look, I need hormones. Who would you recommend? Who's doing the best work out here?
That's a great idea, yeah.
I think those are some really helpful steps for some of our listeners to be able to take to get started on their hormone replacement journey. But
well, one other thing there, I suspect that you're able to download a free copy of our book that you can give a link.
yes,
And what I describe is the process for women. They should be looking for this. Best case. I'm strongly opinionated. And what I think is the roadmap for women is sitting right there in that book. And the elements thereof, organic oils, 24-hour urine hormone testing, a titration process, dose determination process.
Yeah, your book, I know it's available for purchase on Amazon, and then all of my patients that come to see me as well, I do send them the downloadable PDF version.
For no charge, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And we've trained a lot of providers, so connecting with us, I know who I'm training. I really appreciate who we're training.
Great. One kind of last question for you. Beyond hormones, Dr. Rosensweet, what role do lifestyle factors like diet, exercise, and stress kind of play in conjunction with the BRITE method and with hormone replacement in general?
Another big one. So many people sooner or later in life get concerned with their health. And every one of us know that we got to eat right and not eat wrong. And we know that we've got to exercise right and do enough of it of the right kind. Let's just start there. This is critical. There's no getting around this. These are our moment-to-moment, and they have moment-to-moment molecular consequences. So nutritional supplementation. We still live in a day and age, even if you're eating 100% organic, that it's probably good to supplement nutrition. I take supplements. And then really getting on a path to heal our emotions, our mind, and our life. Because good health is ultimately dependent on living the beautiful life that's ours to live. And we're imperfect, so we're in a journey to this. And there's wonderful things to learn about emotions and what we think and the attitudes that we have and how we communicate with others and how we get totally responsible for our own pain and we don't smash anybody else with it. And so there's this whole body of knowledge that comes under the aegis of personal growth or spiritual growth. I think that's the core of all of it, really. It's hard to eat right when you're agitated all the time because you've got unfinished fear that you just haven't dealt with. It's hard to make wise relationship decisions. It's hard to be present for a relationship when you're distracted by your own internal pain and your own negative beliefs about love and stuff. So there's some, you named the big one, Andrea.
I said final question. I didn't say easy question.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. I think you've, sharing your expertise. This has been, I think it's life-changing for many of our listeners. I think I'm very grateful that you spent this time with us. So thank you so much for joining us, Doc.
My honor. Such a pleasure to hang out with the two of you.
We'll have to do it again.
Good.
Again. But thank you again for joining us. This is Living Health Live with me, Dr. Tom Chaney. You can always reach our office at mylivinghealth.com. I also want to just thank our sponsor for today's show, it's Cyrex Laboratory. So they're specializing in functional immunology testing. They do tissue antibody testing, assessment of predictive antibodies to a variety of antigens for early detection and monitoring of many of today's complex autoimmune conditions. So thank you, Cyrex, for sponsoring today's segment. And if you have any questions, you can always leave them down below in the comments. We're going to put a link to the book down there as well, so you can get Dr. Rosensweet's book and download that and educate yourself more about hormones. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.